They learned how to cry like humans do.
Hi, I'm Tommy Rocket, and we're here today with my 197th Tommy Rocket Show. We're here today with world-class journalist Peter Phipps and journalism instructor and Rhode Island icon Rudy Cheeks. Rudy Cheeks was a guest on my show many, many years ago. I believe it was in 1993, and he's back today. He's back today to talk about the past, today, and all good things. Peter, tell me about what we're going to talk about with Rudy today. By the way, Rudy, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, sure, Tommy. I've been camped outside the studio since 1993, waiting for you to call
Now,
again.
Well, that's because it's such a good show.
Yeah.
And
yes, I'm an icon, just like like those things on you see on computers.
But when you were on in '93, how were you dressed, Rudy? Were you wearing a sport coat
I
and an
told him
iron
that
shirt?
he had on a black baseball jacket that said New York Sanitation Department, and he had a mink hat on.
But you don't remember that because you...
No.
No, I
That's
remember
like-
that, but I do remember that jacket. It was a light jacket, the New York Sanitation jacket. I can't remember where I got that.
It was like a spring
Somebody gave it to me.
jacket, like something
Yeah, it was.
you wear
Yeah,
in
it
the
was.
spring.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I wish I still had that. Yeah.
Sounds snappy.
That was great, and I think a lot of people still ask me, well, sometimes people recognize me and they say, Tommy, do you remember the show when you had Rudy Cheeks on and he had the fur hat? And I said, yes, I do. And because they remember, people remember images.
Yeah.
You know, not necessarily the words that you said, but they do remember images. And people that recall that show to me often say, I remember Rudy Cheeks with the hat on.
The fur hat. Well, maybe it was the first time they ever saw anything other than bald head. I don't know.
Maybe.
But you would perform in wedding dresses, but we digress. But we digress. So here's where we wanted to start.
For people that don't know.
Right, you were not born Rudy Cheeks.
No,
You were
my
born
real
Bruce
name is Bruce
McRae,
McRae.
right?
Yeah.
And you went to Tolman
High School, and
your
the University of Rhode
You got all
Island.
kinds of hair in your picture. I've seen the picture of that.
I did have hair, and but I mean, I started going bald by the time I hit college, and eventually it became obvious to me that I looked better with my hair very short or no hair at all.
Yeah.
So I've gone with the no hair at all look for a long time now.
So we're going to tell stories here today. Rudy Cheeks, where'd you get the name?
All right, well, I was rehearsing with my band. The first band I ever had was called the Fabulous Motels. And it was the band that led into the young adults, which most people know me from. But the Fabulous Motels, we were rehearsing in a loft space, which was an old factory building, and it had the old wiring in it. And because of the old wiring, sometimes you get radio signals that would go through your amplifiers when we were rehearsing. And we heard a police radio report saying they were going to pick up these two women who were basically hookers working the street. Yeah, working women. They're working the street across the street. This was on Pine Street, the corner of Pine and Summer in Providence. This is back about 1970, 71. Oh. So I was basically, we heard this. And we said to the women, we yelled out the window, hey, listen, come on up here and take a break. The police are coming to pick you up. So they came over and they just sat down. We were all, drinking a beer or something like that. And one of them said to me, you have Ruddy Cheeks. And we were all making up fake names for ourselves at the time. Charlie Clavery was Charles Rocket already. And Stevie Stresbeck was Stevie Thunder. And so I was looking for a name, so I said, Rudy Cheeks, that's a good name. And I decided I'd start calling myself Rudy Cheeks.
It's very catchy.
But I'll tell you what, I didn't, I was just thinking this was for this band. And, just like that when the Beatles started, you'll see interviews with them, they thought maybe we'll last a year or two, and that's about it. I mean, you're not thinking that for the rest of my life I'm going to be Rudy Cheeks,
right,
which
but
is
you
how
are.
it weren't. Yeah,
you
that's
are.
how it turned out, yeah.
I mean, if someone shouts out to you on the street, hey, Bruce, do you turn your back? Do you turn your head?
Oh, sure I do.
Yeah, you can.
Sure. Well, yeah, but and I assume that there's somebody who actually knows me. But it's more likely they say, hey, Rudy,
Yeah, Rudy.
But there are people that do call me Bruce.
This is one of many names of your professional entertainment career.
Yep.
You're also well known from the Phillipe and Jorge column. And,
Right.
And you're,
What newspaper was that?
I'm Jorge.
Jorge. Now, how did you get that name?
Okay, well, Chip came up with Phillipe and Jorge because he used to play soccer in Europe after he got out of college, and he played with a lot of folks who had names like Phillipe and Jorge, so he came up with the name. And the title of Cool Cool World for the column, Phillipe and Jorge's Cool Cool World, came from the painter Dan Gosh, who people who know about the arts and especially painting in Rhode Island will know who Dan Gosh is. And he came up with the title Cool Cool World.
So what was that run like, the column? When did it start?
It started in 1979 in the Providence Eagle.
What was the Eagle?
Yeah, we tried to sell it to the new paper, but the new paper publisher told us that'll never go. When we told them what we wanted to do, which was make fun of the Providence Journal and politicians and stuff like that. And he said, that'll never. And we thought it'd be really funny and a great column. And he said no, he wasn't interested in that. But the Providence Eagle at that time was so hot to have Chip and me write for them.
Did they pay you?
Oh yeah, they paid us.
How much you get? Do you remember?
Oh my God! I
$100?
can't remember how much it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
It was more than anybody else was getting freelance at the time. So it might have been less than 100, probably more like 50 at that time.
Right. Now I remember you used to call Governor Sunland.
Yeah, Captain Blowhard.
Used to call.
I came up with that one.
You used to call the Journal.
The urinal or the blow.
The Providence Urinal.
The Providence Urinal or the Blow Joe, and then we would also call it the Below Joe when Below owned it from Texas.
Right.
Yeah.
And what were some other names you had?
Oh well, let's see. Governor Dupree was the Gerber Babe.
Yes,
I remember that. The Gerber.
Yeah.
He looked like the Gerber Babe.
Well, he had that curl. He had that spit curl.
And
in
he
front.
had the cheeks.
But but I'll tell you what. Who actually gave us the name? The first person to call him the Gerber Babe, but she could never do it out loud because she was his press secretary, Nancy Martin.
No kidding.
Yes, that's who actually came up with the Gerber Babe.
Now I have to acknowledge, as an employee of the Journal for many years.
Yeah.
You would drop a bundle of papers off in front of the Journal.
Oh yeah.
And there were stories in my mind about the management would confiscate
them and throw them in the trash, right?
And then, of course, that increased the value of everything, right? I mean, when they did that. And one time I was writing a business column, and I think I was occasionally on the capital side of things.
Oh yeah.
And you guys called me an Uber yuppie. and at the time, I had to look up Uber. I didn't, which was fantastic.
You weren't. Yeah. Well, you didn't do. Yeah. You had to know German. You have to.
Yeah.
Well, like Deutschland über alles. We were,
Yes. So I thought that stuck, right?
Yeah.
So,
right.
Now, and then you had names within. You had num de plums within your num de plum, and you were Dr. Love Monkey for a while.
I was Dr. Love Monkey. Well, I wrote a column called Ask Dr. Love Monkey. Well, what happened was there was at one point this was for the Providence Eagle, Providence Phoenix. I'm sorry, the Providence Phoenix, and at one point there was an editor there, Jody. And Jody Erickson, her name is Jody Erickson Santos now. She married a guy named David Santos. But Jody wanted me to write a advice to, a relationship advice column. And I said, why me? I didn't understand this. I didn't have a wife or even a regular girlfriend at the time. So I couldn't figure out why she thought I'm the one who should write it.
Because it's funny. That's why.
Okay, well, it would be funny. I told her it would
funny.
be funny. I said it has to be funny. I said, and it'll be like kind of jokey advice. And so Jody pushed this idea, and she's doing. So I came up with the title, Ask Dr. Love Monkey, though.
Right, and what was like a love monkey topic like? Were there question and answers? I think there were.
Well, yeah, there were questions and answers,
right?
But I had a hard time getting people to send in questions.
So you made them up, right?
I did have to make them up most of the time, yeah, because I couldn't.
It was like writing Dear Anne.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for the lovelorn.
Yeah, but it was a little,
Ann
a little
Landers,
edgy,
mean,
a little
yes.
and funny. Okay, so then.
Yeah, my idea was to be a humor column. Anyway, my idea about everything has always been to twist it to my prism of, the way I see things. And make them funny and make them,
right.
alter the prism.
So, how'd you get the name? The Fabulous Motels. What does that mean?
That was we were trying to come up with a name for the band, and I can't remember who came up with Fabulous Motels as, but we just kept throwing out names, and that was the one that become the one that nobody had any objections to, so we went with it. But, I mean, at one point, one of the guys in the band wanted to call the band Sam and Janet Evening. Well, because that's a joke, some enchanted evening. Sam and Janet Evening, that was one of the titles. Oh, and then there was another one. Oh, Dan Gosh, who was in the band, had a great idea. I thought that this was a really good one. Oh, what the heck was it? He had a better name, I thought. It was what the heck? It's a term for flatulence. Hold on,
of which there are many.
Yeah. I can't.
But anyway, hey, so it had what? Accordions?
Yeah, we had 2 accordions in the Fabulous Motels.
It's a rock and roll band with 2 accordions?
Yep, 2 accordions and a clarinet, because I played clarinet at the time.
So what did you sound like?
Harmonica. It sounded very unusual.
Like a polka band, a klezmer band? What did you sound like?
No, we played rock and roll songs, and we wrote our own songs, but they were rock songs. It was just that it had the accordion sound.
Right.
Was it like early 70s rock?
It didn't sound like, well, like I said, it didn't sound like anybody else. We wanted to be totally original. That was always my idea about everything, to be as totally original and unique as possible.
Now, then that morphed into the young adults.
Into the young adults, yeah. Then that became a much more professional rock and roll band with a much more standard rock and roll lineup, which was bass, drums, guitar, piano, and me on harmonica and saxophone, and me and Sport Fisher, a.k.a. Dave Hansen, singing.
And you cut a few albums, as they say, right?
Well, we cut a single, and then we cut an album. Yeah, we cut only one album, really.
Did they sell? I mean, how did it go? Or?
Yeah, not really. They didn't really sell. Well, we didn't have a major record company behind us.
Right.
We did the album because it was basically the soundtrack for the movie Complex World, which is a title of a young adult song that Sport wrote, that Dave Hansen wrote, called "It's a Complex World,"
which is a classic. It's a cult
great
classic.
Great song.
And
but here's a really much more interesting story, I think, and this is something it would be under the category of things that people don't know, which is that the movie Dumb and Dumber, which Peter and Bobby Farrelly, who were fans of the young adults, made, was originally going to be titled "A Power Tool Is Not a Toy," which is another Dave Hansen, Sport Fisher young adult song. And but the film company said, no, that's too misleading. Nobody will know what the movie's about if we call it that. So they went with Plan B, which was
Complex
Dumb and
World.
Dumber.
Dumb and Dumber. That's right.
Yeah.
But
So
we're out of time.
We're
out of time. Out of segment 1. So please stay tuned for the rest of the Tommy Rocket Show after these public service announcements.
Behind the beauty lies the beast. Please buy cruelty-free. For more information, call the right people for the ethical treatment of animals. P.O. Box 42516, Washington, D.C. 20015.
Hi, and welcome back to the second segment of the Tommy Rocket Show. As you know, we're here with Rudy Cheeks and Peter Phipps. Peter, what were we talking about?
We were talking about, under the general topic of a celebrity life, we were talking about the Complex World, the movie. So how did that happen? And
what was it about?
Well, I mean, celebrity life. I mean, I would run into a lot of people who I guess are considered celebrities over the years just because of the work I did, But the Complex World movie, basically, prior to that, a couple of years prior to the Complex World movie, we were Jim Wilpaw, myself, and a guy named Les Daniels were trying to do a film called Comediac the Motion Picture, and that was based on this nightclub act I did called Comediac. But that didn't work out. But Jim Wilpaw took what was left from that and decided and created a whole new idea, which was Complex World movie. And so he called me up about, Rich Lupo called me up about 85, 86, because Rich Lupo ended up being the money behind it. Rich and Jim were best pals, and Rich always, got behind the financing of Jim's projects. So Jim came up with this idea for a movie called Complex World. It wasn't called that at the time. He just said that we have to have the young adults in the movie. I said, okay. I said, let me talk to everybody else, because at that point, we had stopped playing. The band had broken up in 1980. So this is probably about 80, 586, and I get a phone call from Rich and Jim, and I said, okay, I said, I'll talk to everybody and see if they're up for doing it. And we thought it was a crazy enough idea that we'll do it. You know, it just sounded like a nutty idea, but okay, so, and you know, so Jim had written this screenplay, and part of the movie was about blowing up Lupo's nightclub, the Heartbreak Hotel, and it was, you know, some terrorists are going to blow up the nightclub and blah, 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 all this and that. And and throughout, but they're showing what a typical night is like at Lupo's Heartbreak Hotel.
Right.
And we are, I think it's just called the Heartbreak Hotel at that time. But so we are the band on stage at that time, the young adults of the band. And so we play a lot of our songs. And there's an opening act who's one of the guys who's also hooked up with the terrorists, and that's Stanley Matus, who, you know, that's his real name. And he's really the star of the movie. And Stanley was a friend of ours who we basically introduced Jim and Rich to. So so, you know, so the movie, it was funny, it was a comedy, and it was, you know, and it had a good cult following around here. And it just was re-released. I think they have it on Amazon or one of these things. I don't know how they do it now.
So I was Googling you.
Yeah.
And there you are. You have a bio in IMDb.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah. Well, from that, and I was involved in a few other movies. I was involved in the movie Me, Myself, and Irene, too. And I was also involved in the Buddy Cianci documentary that Cherry Arnold did. I was an advisor on that.
What was the name of that?
I think it was just called Buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard bits of that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Buddy talks a lot in it, right? Buddy's in it?
Yeah, Buddy's in it, and they use a lot of old footage. See, my main help for her was finding out where the footage. I knew where all the footage was. I was going to talk to Bob Rose at Channel 10.
Oh, you mean finding the footage? Yeah.
Yeah, I knew who had the best footage. Channel 10 had the best old footage of Buddy, you know, campaigning through the years.
Yeah.
And she utilized that in a lot of the film. And yeah, and then she shot some new interviews. I was interviewed, you know, among other people.
Now you got along with a lot of politicians. For example, we just mentioned Sunland.
Yeah.
Who didn't like me particularly.
I got along great with Sunland for some reason or other.
Did you see him after he was governor and things?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you hung out with him a little bit.
Yeah, I did. I spent some time with him, yeah.
Yeah. The thing about Sunland was I always figured he had trouble hearing, so that's why he would be so
he did,
in your face, because he wanted to direct everything, you know?
Right.
Now, Buddy, you didn't have a great relationship with Buddy?
Well, initially I didn't, but it calmed down a bit after a while because Buddy decided he couldn't bully me anymore.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't going to work. And he was right. It wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to affect what I was going to write about him or anything like that. So he just gave up after a while.
Yeah. What was the funniest? What was the sharpest dig you think you gave to Buddy? You must have had fun with that missing
I think
cocaine at the
just
police station.
calling him the Bud Eye, I guess, was pretty interesting. Yeah. But that's because the movie Return of the Jedi was coming out at the same time that he was going to run for mayor again after the first time when he had to, for the fireplace log incident. He was
the nightmare.
After that, he was able to right at the time that the movie The Return of the Jedi was coming out. I think it was early 90s or something.
You, of course, had the Return of the Bud Eye.
Yeah, we had the Return of the Bud Eye. That was the title of one. And so we just started referring to him as the Bud Eye all the time.
Right, he didn't like
it.
it.
It seemed to work because, Buddy was like, everybody called him Buddy. He liked to call himself Buddy. But the Bud Eye, because it's gigantic ego,
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you knew Susan Farmer?
I knew Susan Farmer very well. She was a wonderful person. I loved Susan Farmer. She and Mac Farmer are wonderful people.
Right.
And she helped me out a great deal. I used to eat at her. I'd have dinner at her. Actually, Phillipe and Jorge, and there was a Susan Farmer, Phillipe and Jorge bowling tournament for a few years back in the 1980s.
There was? And you raised money?
Yes, there was. We raised money. We raised money for the Fund for Community Progress. This is back in the 1980s.
Was it at Lang Bowl-O-Rama?
It wasn't at Lang. You know where it was? It was at Chips on North Main Street.
I remember. It was
the underground one.
Yes.
The underground one.
Yeah.
I think that's where it was. Although you know what? No, it was at Lang's Bowl-O-Rama. Chips underground one. The one that was at Chips was the one that Richard Richard Walton did for Nicaragua.
Right.
That was at Chips.
So this was at
Yeah,
Lang's
it was
Bowl-
at Lang's Bolorama, right.
So one thing...
I knew Bruce Lang, too, who was a great guy.
Right.
And was a friend of both Susan Farmer's and
Susan Farmer, I always see her wearing that blue silk cotton dress, whatever it was, and high heels walking in parades, a Columbus Day or Bristol or something, right? And with the blonde hair and everything was perfect.
Oh, she was classy.
So, but on the other hand, we've talked a little bit beforehand here. You knew a trans artist named Lady Chablis, right?
Lady Chablis. I didn't know Lady Chablis. What happened is that Lady Chablis is in the movie and book. What the heck's the name of it? It takes place in Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah.
Oh, what the heck is it? Clint Eastwood made the movie. What the heck is it?
Midnight and something.
Yeah, Midnight. Yeah, in the Garden of Good and Evil or something like that.
Yes, yeah.
Midnight in the
so
Garden
Lady
of Good and
Chablis
Evil.
in that.
Lady Chablis is in it, and Lady Chablis is a trans. I don't know if she's trans, but it's a
Female impersonator.
Yeah, female impersonator.
Yeah.
Has a drag act. Has a drag act, and Lady Chablis was doing a show at this male strip club, at a gay male club in Providence, and my wife at the time, Susan, wanted to go see Lady Chablis, so we went. And Buddy was there. And this is when Buddy was trying to make his next comeback. This is just after he had been, I guess he had just been convicted and was about to be sentenced to prison.
The Fort Dix thing?
And he was, he was there that night too, because one of the last groups that stayed were very were kind to him was the gay
community.
was the LGBT community.
Yeah. And so a lot of your acting gigs are somehow through the Farleys, right?
Well, no, that's the only that big movie that Me, Myself, and Irene.
Right.
No, I acted in all sorts of small independent films.
Yeah.
I also worked with Michael Correnti on Federal Hill, but I got edited out of that one, just like I got edited out of Me, Myself, and Irene.
So what's that story about it's supposed to be a great bit in you're the farmer in
I play
Me,
the
Myself.
farmer who, early on in the movie, Jim is a state trooper, and he ends up shooting
Carrey.
and beating up, punching out, and then shooting a cow. It's an animatronic cow, by the way.
Well, of course.
And I'm the farmer who owns the cow, and that's the scene that they shot.
Yeah.
And
unfortunately, when they made the theatrical cut or
it didn't make the theatrical cut. Although there is a DVD, one of the first DVDs that came out of it, they had my scene in it as one of the deleted scenes.
And Mike Janisonis at the Journal said what?
He thought it was really funny. Michael saw the uncut film, and he said that thought it was one of the funniest scenes in the movie, and he couldn't believe that they cut it. But they had to cut it for length because, you have to it has to be so many minutes long so they can do so many shows each day at a cinema. It's money. That's all it is.
So, but I mean, you've been around. So you played. Talking Heads, you were big. You played with them. You knew them.
Oh yeah, sure. They were good friends. Yeah. Well, David Byrne moved to Providence in 1972 from Baltimore, and he was friends with one of his really good friends. The reason why he moved to Providence was a guy named Mark Keogh, who's a painter and was a good friend of mine. So I met David as soon as he came here, and he was in Providence for a few years. And we used to go to the movies together and stuff. No, we were just friends, And then what happened was, I was doing the band, the Fabulous Motels, at the time. David and Mark used to do intermission shows for us. Mark would play the accordion, and David would play violin. Usually, they played under the name Bizadi, Bihzadhi or something like that. I can't remember how it was spelled, but anyway, but they played under that name. And so David wanted to get into the Fabulous Motels were breaking up at one point. This is about 1970, late 73, early 74, I guess. And Charlie and Jeff Shore wanted to start another band. And David tried out as a guitarist, and they said, no, you're not good enough. So David was unhappy about that, but he called up Chris and Tina, who were also students at RISD that he knew. And Chris is a terrific drummer, and Tina was played guitar a little bit, but she learned how to play bass. And so Christina and David moved to New York, and they started Talking Heads.
So we're about to come up with a break, but I mean, I just want to. So you played backed up for the Ramones.
Oh yeah, we played with the Ramones many years later. Yeah, Bo Diddley. Yeah.
You had some big moments.
I played with all sorts of interesting people in rock and roll. Yeah. We played. Yeah, we did a weekend with the Ramones back in the about late '70s in Long Island. It was the Young Adults and the Ramones. Young Adults opened for the Talking Heads a number of times in the earliest days of the Talking Heads.
And what's more interesting than that?
No,
I mean,
don't
come
know.
on.
That was fun.
These are great memories. And we'll be talking about more with Rudy Cheeks when we come back for the third segment of the Tommy Rocket Show, so please stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Pamela Anderson Lee with PETA. You might not think about it every time you get dressed, but every time you put on a pair of shoes, a belt, or a pair of gloves, chances are you're wearing leather. And out of all the things that animals are abused for, leather is the most common. To learn how you can help, call PETA. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome back to the third segment of the Tommy Rocket Show with Rudy Cheeks and Peter Phipps. Rudy, we were talking about Tiny Tim. Tell us about how you met him.
Well, I did a gig with him back, and it was January 1981, and I remember that because he had Ronald Reagan had just been inaugurated, because the first song he opened with on his set was "Bad Moon Rising." And it was to me, it was a very pointed political statement. But anyway, I was on we were on a bill together. There was me as a band called The Tits, and there was and Tiny Tim, and we were playing at a place called Simon's, which used to be a nightclub in downtown Pawtucket way back then, back in the early '80s. And so, like I said, it was 1981. I remember it also well because right at that time, my friend Charles Rocket was being laid off by Saturday Night Live. He was one of the not ready for primetime players. He was doing the Weekend Update and everything. And Charlie had been he was getting fired by Saturday Night Live, and he was going to sue NBC, which is what he ended up doing. And so I introduced Charlie. Charlie came to the show. He was at the show. He was in from New York, and he came to my show. And we went down the basement where the dressing room was. I introduced Charlie to Tiny Tim, and I said, and Tim is giving Charlie some advice on what kind of a really good lawyer he should get. You give him some names of some lawyers in New York that he might want to get if he's going to sue NBC, which is probably helpful. So anyway, it was really interesting overhearing Tiny Tim telling my friend Charlie, what lawyers he should hire.
Well, so it's interesting. So it's Pawtucket, right?
Yeah,
so
Pawtucket,
I can see why you're in Pawtucket, because you grew up in Pawtucket.
I grew up here, yeah.
Right? But how did Tiny Tim get to a club in Pawtucket?
I don't know. Well, he had a manager who lived in Rhode Island. I think he lived in Cranston. So that was one reason why. And Tim was just, his big days were the 60s,
Right.
And so but he was still, playing around and still doing what he did. And I guess his manager, being in Rhode Island, picked up some shows.
So you were
Rhode Island.
You were on the same bill with him?
Same bill with him, yeah.
Yeah. So, when there are a lot of things about.
He was a nice guy. He was very smart, by the way.
Yeah.
Really knowledgeable about music.
Didn't he get married on the Johnny Carson show?
Yes, in the 60s, yes.
He did, to Miss Vicky.
Yes.
I remember that.
And you have a story about seeing him at a CVS on Reservoir Avenue?
I was at CVS on Reservoir Avenue in Cranston. It had to be about 10 or 15 years ago, and I was trying to get the cashier to wait on me, and everybody was scuffling and running to the back of the store. And I said, "What's going on?" She said, "Don't you know?" She says, "Tiny Tim is in the back of the store at the makeup department. Everybody's running there."
It's too bad. It's too bad. Herbert, that's his real name, by the way. Herbert is not around because the show should be about him, really.
Yeah, no.
So back in the day, when you started out,
Yeah.
you had some social services jobs. You
Well,
weren't always a gig-to-gig entertainment kind of guy.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that took time to, that was when the Fabulous Motels started, and I didn't make up my mind to do that right away. I needed, I was trying very hard I thought I was going to be in the social services business, initially. And I was a house father at the O'Rourke Children's Center, which was, for all intents and purposes, was Rhode Island's orphanage. It's right next to the campus of it is still there, right next to Rhode Island College. I think it's
as you
run by
come
Rhode
in
Island
off
College
Mount Pleasant
now.
Avenue?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I worked there for a couple of years while I was still doing the Fabulous Motels at the time, but I ended up, sticking with the Fabulous Motels and leaving that job and leaving the, house father job. Then later on, a few years later, I was working at a place called, what do they call these things? Sheltered workshops for folks with intellectual disabilities.
Right.
I worked at the Maha Center in Newport.
Right.
And this was back in, I guess this would be the mid-1970s. This is just before we started the young adults. And I was living in Newport, and I was doing that for a couple of years. And so I would have thought that would have been the end of all that, except that after I did music, then I went music, showbiz, entertainment stuff, writing newspaper columns, doing radio shows, everything like that. But then I got hired in 2003, believe it or not. I went back into that business because I really liked doing it and everything. I ended up being the radio director for Insight, which is a nonprofit in Warwick.
Right.
And it was for folks who are blind and visually impaired. And I was the they had a radio reading service, which is basically people come and they read, volunteers read newspapers, magazines, things like that. And we have radios that we distribute, and we would give the radios to folks who are blind and visually impaired, and they could get the news that way because they were, they could not, because of their impairment, they were not able to read newspapers.
But your job was to do the reading or to line up the
No,
readers?
to line up the readers and to run the whole station. In fact, one of the things I ended up doing was I ended up computerizing and digitalizing the whole studio, because originally when I first got the job, which was, I think it was 2003, they were still being run by big reel-to-reel tapes and live and on tape. And I said, we should be digitalized and computerized.
Yeah.
Really?
And so we finally did. Yeah, we finally did. Well, the board of directors got behind that idea, and so we ended up writing a grant, and we got a grant that gave us the money to afford to do that. And so now it's all digitalized and computerized.
So we've talked about you being in the movies. We've talked about you being on stage and rock and roll.
Yeah.
We just touched on radio. You had a big radio career, right?
Well, off and on for about 20 years. I started in 1984 at WHJJ, and then from there I went to WHJY, which was, and worked with Carolyn Fox
Now
for
that was
a number of years.
Was that a morning gig?
That was a morning show.
So how did that? What was your shtick there? What was the thing with Carolyn Fox? She told dirty jokes, right?
It was the
Isn't that
Fox and Cheeks show, and I basically wrote the show, but Carolyn was was the primary figure, because it was unusual to have a, shall we say, foul-mouthed woman, attractive young woman, be the central figure. So she was the center of the show. So it was Fox and Cheeks, but I basically wrote most of the stuff.
You wrote all her lines.
Prepared stuff.
Yeah.
Well, not all. Well, she ad-libbed a lot, but
Right.
But yeah. Anything that was a prepared line, I pretty
Now there are
much wrote.
people
Yeah.
in the audience, of course, who remember that show, and
Yes.
I vaguely remember that show. Were there ever a time when someone would say, "No, that's too far," or "You can't say that," or it seemed like you were saying everything and anything?
Well, we knew that you couldn't, use, four-letter words and stuff like that. She was the one who would try to push the envelope. I was interested in being funny, not so much in pushing the envelope. That was where she was headed, because she
wanted to
at
be
the time
sexy.
Howard Stern was very popular, and so
yes.
she wanted to like push it in that kind of, that direction, and I was just interested in being funny. So and as a matter of fact, after a while, what would happen is when we go into re-sign up for our time to renegotiate our contracts, basically the head of the station, the person who was the general manager of the station, used to say to Carolyn, she's not going to hire her without me. I had to be there because I was like the watchdog. I remember one time the head said, she said, if there's any question about something when you're about to say something, listen to the voice of reason, she said, pointing to me. I am the voice of reason. So
Have you ever
think
been-
of how weird that is. I never
Yeah.
thought I'd be the voice of reason.
You are always the troublemaker on the
Exactly,
set, right?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
But this was the case where I was the voice of reason. So anyway, so I worked with Carolyn there, and then I went back to talk after that. So I did a couple. I did some more. Well, the next talk show I did basically was I had another partner because I thought the partner idea worked well, and at the time they were wanting to do politics. So I thought, you know, right wing, left wing. I'll be the left wing guy, and we'll get a right wing guy. And I had a friend who was the former, and you know him well, Peter, is John Hackett. He was the former chief editorial writer at the Providence Journal.
A big blustery guy. If
A
there
big
was one.
blustery guy and a real right winger.
Yep.
And we were friends, and John and I were friends. And I asked John. I said, John, what do you think? You think this would work? And John was up for it, you know. So we did it. So we did that. We started at PRO, but then we moved from there to WHJJ. We didn't get you know, within the first 2 ratings books periods, we did not get real high ratings. So, and this is how radio works.
This is
They
commercial
just drop
radio,
you. Yeah,
right?
this is
Yeah,
commercial radio. So, but HJJ used to listen to the show, and Jim Corwin, who ran WHJJ at the time, said he loved the show and he thought it was great, and he was very happy to pick us up. As soon as we left PRO, he called us up and said, will you guys come here? I want you here. I want the show here. So we did it for a number of years
Now,
there.
and you had a pretty good run. You were telling, you went to Washington. Tell
Oh,
the
yeah,
story about going
yeah.
for interviews and things.
Well, you go to Washington, D.C. They send, the news director, John Carpilio, John, me, and John Hackett would go to Washington, D.C., and they'd line up people for us to interview there. And yeah, that was where you meet a lot of interesting people too. I remember I met Pierre Salinger and interviewed him. John and I interviewed Pierre Salinger, the former press secretary for President John F. Kennedy. Also Ben Bradley, the former editor of the Washington Post.
They all had books, I suppose.
They all
right?
had books at the time, exactly. That was why they were there. That was fascinating. And there was a guy, and I'm trying to remember what the heck his name was. He was wonderful, who wrote a book called The Nightingale's Song, which was about these guys who went to the U.S. Naval Academy and were all part of the Reagan administration. His name was Bob something, I can't remember, but he was wonderful.
Ollie
He went
North
to
in that group.
He went to the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
Well, I remember him very well because he had, the last day he was in Vietnam, he stepped on a landmine and it blew his face up. And he had all this heavy plastic surgery on his face. He was a wonderful human being too, by the way. I loved him. He was the most interesting guy that we interviewed in Washington at that time. And then one time, Carolyn and I were just to backtrack a little bit, we're in Hollywood doing interviews with celebrities.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, one of the people we interviewed was Timothy Leary.
See?
Oh,
That was pretty interesting. Well, he was an
LSD.
interesting guy.
Yeah.
of LSD fame.
Yeah, yeah.
Of LSD
yeah.
fame, yes. And there were a couple other people we interviewed there. And the most interesting guy I interviewed there was Jack Larson. Now, Jack Larson is probably not known to anybody until I tell you who it is. Jack Larson played Jimmy Olsen on the Superman TV show in the 1950s. Jack Larson was brilliant,
Was
an
he?
amazing human being, a brilliant guy.
Wow, and we could talk
And he
about
also,
the,
and Jack Larson also was Monty Clift's boyfriend for a while. How is
really?
that? How
Oh,
cool is that?
Wow, I like that.
Yeah, how
But-
heavy is that, huh?
but
All right,
real-
well, I knew that, yeah. But anyway, but we couldn't talk about any of the really cool stuff. He knew Harry Partch, who was an avant-garde composer that I admired very much, and he had met him. So me and Jack talked about all this stuff off the air. On the air, all we could talk about was Superman.
Not to interrupt you, but we have to stop for the break, and we'll come back for the fourth and final segment of the Tommy Rocket Show with Rudy Cheeks.
Hi, I'm Alicia Silverstone with PETA. When it comes to animals, there's no need to be a classroom cut-up. Use your right to refuse to dissect frogs, cats, pigs, even worms. Contact me at PETA for information on exciting, humane alternatives to dissection. They'll help you make the grade without using animals. Remember, biology is the study of life, not death. Thanks.
Hi, and welcome back for the fourth and final segment, but not the least, of the Tommy Rocket Show with Rudy Cheeks and Peter Phipps. Peter, where were we?
We were sort of talking about the days. You know, you were showing something of your Club Genius show.
Oh, yeah.
You had your own little sketches on that.
Oh, yeah.
What was Club Genius? What was that?
Oh, it was just a stupid name for a. It was a TV show. Well, first of all, it started out as there was a song called Swinging Genius Party, and then that was the name of my first radio talk show. It was called Swinging Genius Party. Oh. But Club Genius, we used to use the word genius because we wanted to make fun of the word genius all the time. And Club Genius was the name of the TV show I did for Cox back in '82 and '83.
And what was the format?
It was just, well, it was just to be a comedy talk show, you know.
Yeah. But the opening, we were looking at the opening on YouTube.
Yeah.
You can see it on YouTube, of course,
Yeah.
like everything. And there's sketches, and you're
Yeah,
singing a song.
I did. Well, I mean, I did the whole thing myself. It was, like I said, my idea of art is to do as much a reflection of me as possible. So I did pencil drawings, and I wrote the theme song and sang it. Yeah.
What are some lines of that theme song? Do you remember?
Theme song, Club Genius is the swingin'est place in town. Club Genius, your IQ will come around. From green to brown, from up to down, from Stalingrad to Vegas. Open up them pearly grates for a Club Genius. 7 pillars of Club Genius. When I hear the word culture, I reach for my TV guide. I reach for my TV. I reach for a Club Genius. I mean, it's ridiculous.
How many episodes were there? Do you remember?
Yeah, we did probably about 20 some.
That's a lot.
Yeah, 20, 25 maybe.
You know, we just talked it, so it's on YouTube,
Hour-long,
of course.
yeah.
But can you imagine if you would, go back in time and you've got podcasts and YouTube channels.
Yeah.
You know, can you imagine what you could have done with that medium? With
yeah,
your
sure.
sort of sense of creativity?
If I had the money and the technical abilities, we could have been great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought we were pretty great. It was low budget entertainment, and we did the best we could with what we had. So it's fascinating to look at it now and realize what we were operating with at the time.
But I mean, like just the idea of going viral didn't exist. You had to be
Right.
You had to be sponsored. You had to be produced. The man had to have a stake
Absolutely.
in you, right?
It was a whole world that it was, just like the music business. The music business, when I was in it, if you didn't have a major company record deal, you know, that's why I didn't go any further with music stuff sometimes. Why the young adults broke up, because we didn't have a major company record deal. It wasn't the do-it-yourself stuff that people later did and now do all the time. You know,
And now people
it's
are
very different.
loaded with people with millions of followers and who go and get a, those kids.
Yeah, there
who
was
play
no way to get to them without a record deal
Right.
and a distribution.
So in a sense,
channel.
the world's so different. I think
Very different.
It's quite fitting for your style of humor and creativity. Except you came 30 years too early or something like that.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, yeah, the fact is that right now I can't keep doing this since I'm already, 69 years old.
Right. So, I mean, for example, you talked about earlier.
Yes, I am, folks. I know everybody out there was looking at this saying, hey, that guy's like 32. How can he have done all this
I know
stuff?
it.
He doesn't look that different.
Right.
On the day. Well, if you go back on YouTube, you can see what you look like in the day.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So,
well, I look better now.
one of the ideas I think would make it on the internet today is Comediacs. Comediacs, I think.
Well, it did. Well, actually, Comediac, I came up with Comediac in 1979, which was showing the worst movies ever and having a microphone and interacting with the characters on the screen, interacting with the film. And the thing is this, there was something that was. 5 years after I started doing that, these guys out in the Midwest, I think they were from, where the heck were they from? I don't know, Michigan or Wisconsin or somewhere, created something called, it became Mystery Science Theater 3000.
I remember
It was a
that.
very popular show. Well, I was doing it 5 years earlier.
It was a cable show?
Yeah, it was cable, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, cable was just the beginning of breaking the network
I tried to get it
on
on
entertainment.
TV.
Yeah.
I tried to get Comediac on TV. In fact, I did some stuff. I did a pilot show over at Channel 12, but then the guy who was the program director at Channel 12 left because he wanted to join with cable because he wanted to be creative. See, any of the creative people all went with the more creative mediums where there wasn't a lot of money then, so they gave up on the money and went with the other thing. And if they were good, maybe they lucked out and made some money. But and he left, regular TV, Channel 12,
Yeah, but how much of your over the years you've basically been going from gig to gig, and they keep changing all the time, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, and did you ever? How often? It must have come up all the time, where you're in the middle of something and it seems to be going good, and you say, "This is going to make it. This is going to take me. I'm going to hit the big time with this one."
I never really cared about making I just cared about doing the best I could with what I had, and I didn't like to think about that. But to tell you the truth, well, it's like when we were making the young adults. It was called "Helping Others" is the name of the record album that the young adults made. When we made that, CDs were just starting out, and the belief among our producer was that CDs weren't going to catch on, and we only made vinyl and cassette tapes of it.
Right.
So that's all there are. There aren't any CDs of Helping Others.
Right, and it took CDs 4 or 5 years to take over.
Exactly.
And then they got blown up
that's just the way
when the
things are.
iPod came along.
Well, capitalism is not my friend. Let me put it that way. I think I actually told Mark Patinkin that once when he was interviewing me after I had my stroke a few years ago. I told him, I said, I don't really fit in the world of capitalism too well.
Yeah.
You didn't want to be a megastar. You just wanted to be creative.
I just want to do what I love and do it well. That's all.
Well,
being a star was never part of my intention or anything. But I realized that that comes along. You have to do that if you are going to be successful. This stupid celebrity crap world follows you, and can't do much about it.
It becomes a part of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was never enthusiastic about
when
that.
When you were had a regular rock and roll gig with the young adults. Like, how much did that pay? Was it big money? Were you rolling in cash? Or?
No, but I made enough to stay alive. We were what we did. We put ourselves on salary, but we would play. Let's say we would play. Here's what we would do a night. Let's say we were doing Wednesday night at Lupo's, and our deal would be $1,000 against the door. And now this is in 1978 money, let's say.
Yeah.
$1,000 against the door, and we always made it. We usually made a couple thousand.
Now, what does $1,000 against the door mean?
In other words, we get paid $1,000 if nobody shows up. And we get, in other words, we get paid $1,000. That's the least amount of money you can pay us. If not, we get the door. So whatever comes in the door. In other words, everybody's paying like $2, and then they would only pay $2 or $3 at the door.
Yeah.
But we get like 600 people at $2 or $3 at the door, and we'd have like $1,500, $1,800, $2,000.
Right.
For a night's work.
And then Lupo,
playing
it's
music,
a lot of
and the
money.
work is that was a
Lupo
lot of
would
money
make
back then.
from the bar, the food. And
The bar, the club made the money from the bar. That's what we used to do. We used to joke when people didn't want to give us against the door deals. In other words, we would say, we want so much, $1,000 against the door. And they said, we won't give you the door. I said, okay, then give us the bar. That's what I would say to them. And then they get pissed. Then they would just look at me and they realized that I understood economics. Yeah,
Right.
I'm a moron, pal. You know what I mean? I may be in a band, but I'm not stupid,
So what about when you opened for Bo Diddley and then played with Bo Diddley? Was that a good gig? Did that pay well?
No, it didn't. It actually paid less than most. We did it for cheap. We did it because it would keep us in good shape and for the experience, and also it was fun,
Was that local?
That was local. That was at Lupo's. We did it 2 years in a row at Lupo's for a week at a time. Along with it, the first year we did it, we took a day off and we went and played at the ACI with Bo. That was fun.
Really?
That was an interesting gig.
Like B.B. King did that once in Famous
Oh yeah.
Johnny Cash.
Hey, Johnny Cash, Folsom Prison, yeah.
So what would you say? We're gonna have a treat at the end here. You're gonna play us out.
Yeah, okay.
On the harmonica. Okay.
I brought a harmonica, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but before we get to that, every instrument you played, you taught yourself, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
taught myself. Yeah.
So
How did that
How did you
occur?
do that?
Well, you just buy the instrument. You just buy a harmonica. You know, they used to. You know, when I first started buying these things, they were $1.50 a piece.
Horner.
You know what they are now? Honer.
Right.
Yeah, you know what they are now? $40 each, at least.
No.
Yes. How about that?
Where'd you buy them? At Axelrod's?
You could buy them at Axelrod's. I buy mine. There's different places that I would buy them.
So I think we're. I mean,
I buy mine at Ross Music in Warwick, by the way. That's the last place I used to buy them. They were very good to me.
Can you play us out for a couple minutes of
Sure,
harmonica?
I guess so. Yeah. why
Play
not?
something from the young adults, maybe, or
No. You can't play it. It's just solo harmonica, you know. Yeah, that's it.
Rudy, that was great. That was great. I love our harmonica.
Yeah.
But you know, I think we missed the part when he used to play this in the band. We've never got to see that.
Playing with a band is completely different than just picking up an instrument and playing it.
Yeah, great.
It's much more fun, by the way, to play with other people.
So I'm just trying to think.
I think we've worked the wheel, Tommy.
We've
as they
worked
say.
the wheel. We worked the wheel, and we're only hoping that Rudy can come back. Come back
For a third
another
appearance.
episode. There will be the third showing for the Tommy Rocket Show. Peter, thank you. Rudy, it's been a pleasure.
Sure, well, good to see you guys.
And I'm sorry that it went by so quickly because there are so many more things that we could talk about and have fun. But we want to thank you again for coming, thank our audience, and thank everybody for staying tuned to the Tommy Rocket Show. So you'll be glad you did. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
So slip inside this funky house. Whoa, dishes in the sink, the TV's in repair. Don't look at the floor, don't go up the stairs. I'm aching, I'm shaking, I'm breaking like humans do. I'm aching, I'm shaking, I'm breaking like humans do.
You hear people say it all the time. Someone else will do it. Someone else will donate blood. Because someone needs blood every 2 seconds. I'm happy to do it. It's just that it's a lot for one person to take on. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.